The American-Slovenian Education Foundation, ASEF, is an organization that enhances American and Slovenian education activities, uniting Slovenian scholars and educators globally. It has three core values: academic excellence, character formation, and dedicated service, permeated by special care for Slovenian heritage. In the ASEF podcast, we host ASEF professors to get to know their research, best practices from their field, their vision for the development of that field in Slovenia, and how they envision collaborating among Slovenians worldwide. Welcome to the second episode of the ASEF podcast. In our first episode, we explored the field of astrophysics, and today we will be talking with two ASEF professors about computer science and artificial intelligence. With us are Professor Ivan Bratko, Professor of Computer Science at the University of Ljubljana, and Marinka Žitnik, Assistant Professor of Biomedical Informatics at Harvard University, and me, Tanya Janko, as your podcast host. Thank you both very much for joining us. First, we would like to ask you if you can briefly introduce yourselves, tell us where you studied, for how long you've been in the field, maybe something about your current research, and perhaps some unique or unexpected challenges that you faced during your career. And Professor Bratko, maybe you can start.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I started with AI. I have been in AI forever. I started over 40 years ago now. I studied at University of Ljubljana. My first study was electrical engineering. It was not possible to study computer science at that time, but then my doctorate was already in computer science. I'm working at University of Ljubljana as professor of computer science. I also worked at Josef Stefan Institute for a long time. I also worked in several universities worldwide as a visiting professor or visiting scientist, including University of Edinburgh or University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, and University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, Alpen Adria University in Austria, and some others. I'm interested in machine learning. That's my main area. And the other area is that I really love is qualitative reasoning. Probably machine learning is very well known, so that this is almost all of AI now. Qualitative reasoning is an area which I have been enjoying a lot. It looked very promising with a lot of brilliant ideas, but then did not get any close to machine learning in terms of popularity and importance. Maybe I'm going to stop here. Give Marinka a chance to introduce herself.
Okay, great. Thank you, Professor Bratko. So I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. As you said, I'm currently assistant professor at Biomedical Informatics at Harvard and at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. Before then, I was a postdoctoral scholar with Juraj Leskovec in Computer Science Department at Stanford. And before then, I studied at University of Ljubljana. I got my PhD in Computer Science in 2015 and my bachelor's in Computer Science and Mathematics in 2012. And I was really fortunate to have fantastic mentors during my undergraduate, including Professor Bratko, who was professor of my some of the artificial intelligence courses that I took that really made me excited about these areas and fields. And then very quickly, I had a chance to think about important areas where AI can help and be very useful. And biology and medicine are one of those areas that have attracted me a lot. And then I in today's research, my primary focus is really on realizing that science and medicine, biology crucially depend on existence of scientific instruments. And those instruments in the past were primarily physical devices like microscopes that have facilitated discovery in sciences. And today we are in the era of modern data intensive sciences. We need a new kind of instruments. And in my vision, these instruments are in vital ways optimized for knowledge discovery from data. So my primary focus here at Harvard is to develop new machine learning algorithms that can generate actionable predictions, and I can explain that later what I mean by that, that can really guide discovery in sciences, in biology and medicine in particular, and generate predictions that are trustworthy, that endpoint users can trust and interpret in a meaningful way.
Okay, so let's dive right into the field of artificial intelligence. Professor Bratko, you are regarded as a father of AI in Slovenia. Can you tell us how it all began?
Okay, that's a good question. But before I say that, I would like to thank Marinka for very kindly mentioning me among her professors. And I can also tell Marinka that with great pleasure, I remember her as my student because it was easy to see that she was the best student in her group. So I was later very, very happy to see that her career went so well. Now about AI, I joined the field of AI when it was really in its beginnings still. And the whole field was much smaller than now. So it was actually even, I think, possible to know personally almost all of our colleagues worldwide who are working in the same area of AI as we were working. And this initial period of research in AI was actually very exciting because somehow we were getting fundamentally new results or discoveries, new ideas very frequently. So often during conferences, there was the feeling in the air that we were witnessing the making of history. So that actually that was a lot of fun. And in a sense, I thought that at that time AI was actually good for us, or for AI, that it was not so advanced, because now that AI has become so successful, we had to start worrying about misuses of AI. So these issues of ethical issues of AI, about legislation of AI, in order to prevent misuses of artificial intelligence. Also, for example, about how AI can influence and distort normal democratic processes through manipulation of people with the use of AI on the web. If I may, I can tell a little a small story that's something that I learned from Professor Donald Mickey, who at some point in my initial years of my work in AI became my unofficial mentor. Donald was regularly listed as one of the 10 pioneers of AI in the world. At the start of his career, he was a biologist and geneticist, and then he got interested in AI. But then he was always telling that AI was so different from biology. In biology, researchers in biology were very disciplined. They knew they were sticking to their established experimental methodology, and AI was completely different from that. So no discipline, no self-criticism, and just always being overly optimistic. And I remember these Donald's words, which I would like to share with you. He said that to him, AI at that time was like a club of dilettantes with mutual admiration. So that's a phrase that I remember until the present day. Okay, so this is how it started, and it was throughout. It was around.
So there is a lot of hype around artificial intelligence in the past couple of years, but there were some periods where the hype noticeably decreased, which some people call AI winters. Do you have any wisdom that you could share from that experience to gain some perspective on the current situation? And Professor Bratko, please start.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I very clearly remember AI winters, but I think that these winters were always the result, until now, the result of overly optimistic promises made by AI researchers. So AI researchers being so optimistic, they were making these huge promises quite irresponsibly, and then the general public reacted to that, and that caused this AI winters as a kind of disappointment with respect to the big expectation raised by the promises. For example, one of these very famous promises was that machine translation will be done by the year, I think, 1980 or already in 1970s, which was completely unrealistic. Then, there were also AI summers in the meantime, when with a lot of hype, and actually we were not, as researchers, we were not so much affected by the winters, because our funding was more or less stable, but we noticed immediately during the summers, many new people started appearing. Nobody knew where they came from, and they just came there to make some quick, easy money and become famous very quickly. But then when the summer was over, they immediately they already disappeared very quickly. So yes, that is my experience. Maybe the present hype about AI is probably again full of overstatements or too much expectation of what AI can do, and logically a new winter could possibly follow, but I don't believe that there will be another winter, because in the meantime the progress in the technology of AI has been so solid that it's hard to imagine a new winter.
And Professor Zitnik, what is your perspective on the situation? And what do you think that are some of the most pressing issues in the field of AI in the current space?
Yeah, so I'm actually too young to have experienced AI winters before, but I have certainly heard of them, and especially nowadays with so much enthusiasm and high expectations, they are increasingly often discussed in research circles. And it's interesting to see how some of the most prominent conferences in this area, including ICML, NeurIPS, for example, have grown tremendously over the last few years. And they were conferences that only a few years ago had 1,000, 2,000 people, and now they have over 15,000 attendants, for example, at NeurIPS. So it's really clearly seen how the field has grown tremendously, and it has expanded in various areas beyond core computer science departments, where people are trying to use these advancements that have been introduced over the last few years to advance a variety of research areas. So I think that there has been some tremendous progress made over the last few years, and we see that through many very successful applications. Some of the challenges that we still face today are that machine learning models now, where we have seen that they have been successfully used, for example, for image recognition, language modeling to some extent, have been increasingly also implemented in practice in real-world situations. And in those critical applications like healthcare or criminal justice. And so what I think is that when we are starting to make these jumps from applications that were primarily done in online worlds to applications of AI that we see in real world or in offline world, there are some fundamental challenges that need to be taken into account. And that is that often accuracy alone is not enough. So it's not enough just to have very high performing models that according to some performance metric perform really well. Because it is critical to ensure that these models that often are then used as inputs to humans that then in turn make these critical decisions about what drug to prescribe to a patient or whether a particular defendant should be released on bail or not. It's critical then that these models behave responsibly and that in some way behave fair and they are trustworthy. And so that means that there are a variety of auxiliary criteria that are very important beyond just measuring the sole accuracy of the models. And so that now has opened quite almost a Pandora box of some of the issues that need to be addressed in AI algorithms and also data sets that we are using to train these algorithms, to think about how to train trustworthy models that can provide predictions that are accurate, but in the way they are also such that they are transparent or they are fair or they preserve privacy, especially in these critical applications like healthcare, criminal justice, and other applications in real world, where we are now trying to apply and use AI models, given all the successes that we have seen, for example, in social networks, language modeling. And I think it's fundamentally important to address those challenges in order to really see the kind of revolution or that we all are hoping for of AI in a variety of fields in our real world settings, not just in our online world.
As you said, AI is becoming invaluable tool for medical research. Can you, and Professor Žitnik, you're also involved in the Chan Zuckerberg BioHub. Can you provide us with some perspective on this and the future of AI in the medical field?
Sure. So I was involved with Chan Zuckerberg BioHub when I was on the West Coast at Stanford. That's where the CZ BioHub is. Today, I'm more involved with the Broad Institute here at MIT and Harvard. And I think there is lots of progress being made in the medical sphere in terms of AI applications. And there are some good and bad observations. So let me try to be positive and kind of first mention some of the successes that we have seen today, where in the medical field, there have been first digital devices, digital pills approved by FDA. This is the regulatory agency in the US that has approved these digital medicines for the first time last year. And so what I mean by that, those are now medicines that are not just, that don't consist only of chemistry as a form of treatment and a pill, but they actually have a digital component, like an app that has a particular algorithm implemented that can then help patients who take those treatments really plan their treatments well and monitor their level of certain molecules in their body based on a patch that patients typically take. And then these algorithms can recommend or predict in advance what kind of dosage of treatment the patient should take. So this is just one example of successful application of AI in biology and medicine. We have seen also tremendous examples of these algorithms being able to predict in advance, way in advance, almost like 6 to 9 hours in advance, what is the risk that for a patient to develop some unexpected complications that are result of surgery, or that identify patients that are at high risk for sepsis, for example, or other complications, and are able to do that, these algorithms, further they are able to make predictions further in the future than their human counterparts. So that is very exciting, because it means that now we can use these algorithms for early detection of unexpected events. We can also use them to identify what are probably most safe, effective and safe treatments for for patients, and we can make and that can be used. That can be used by doctors who can make more informed decisions. Now, on the other hand, these applications have also revealed several challenges that we need to solve. In particular, what has turned out to happen is that in several cases, it was seen that AI models perform really well for certain groups of individuals, but very poorly for others. So it has been seen, for example, that the algorithms perform much more give accurate predictions for white population, a particular population of European descent, than for other populations. And why is that the case? The case is that in medical fields, and particular genomics, the last 20 years or so, the data that we have generated, that the field has generated and accumulated, has primarily been data about these individuals of European descent. And so that data is sufficiently rich to train models that are accurate. But there is lack of diverse data representations and models that would perform also equally well for other patient groups. And of course, that is something that is a major factor when we think of deploying AI models in medical applications. And so much of today's research is quite focused on making sure that AI models perform equally well across patient groups. And then thinking about how now AI models, together with other fields in CS, for example, robotics, can instrument surgeries, can identify a priori what patients might respond or not respond to treatments, and what would be the best course of treatment for them.
Well, very interesting. And where do you hope to see the evolution of personalized medicine and the accessibility of personalized drugs to go, in which direction?
Oh, so I would say that today we are still there are a few areas where personalized medicine has really taken off, and there are areas in oncology, for example, where the treatment is predicted based on the genomic profile of the patient and the kind of mutations that are found in the tumor sample of the patient. And sort of in that case, since we talk about machine learning models, then machine learning models are typically trained on these large genomic sequence data of retrieved from tumor samples of patients in order to try to match what kind of treatment would be best for a patient. And so that is a part of personalized medicine because it's personalized towards a particular patient. However, prevailing techniques today are still based on this more on the view of medicine in the 20th century, where primarily we say the doctors identify diagnosis for a patient, which is a problem in its own, and then given that diagnosis, prescribe the treatment. And so that, of course, that is not personalized yet because it does not take into account a variety of factors that the patient has. So we are slowly moving away towards this view of one size fits all. And we are moving towards personalized medicine. I think in many ways that has been enabled by availability of diverse data sets from genomics to lifestyles and behavior data of individuals. And so now we need these knowledge discovery methods that can bring these data together in order for to build a recommendation system that will say for a given patient, integrate the data from the genomic to lifestyle level in order to make prediction for that patient in terms of what treatment would work well, or what kind of regime in terms of dosage and frequency would work well for that patient. I think in the future, we also will probably move away from the view of treatments being pills. That's classically how we see them today. You go to a doctor, you are diagnosed, you get a prescription, you go to a pharmacy, you get a drug, you take it, right? And so that drug is a form of a pill, or treatment is typically a pill or some kind of infusion. We don't need to think about that in this way. So there is quite a lot of view of thinking of treatments more broadly. They can be part of they can be any interventions, perhaps exercise, food, perhaps lifestyle changes in behavior. So imagine you would go to a doctor and they would prescribe to you 3 bananas and 1 hour of run every day and this additional pill. So then these interventions become much more complex and then really tailored to individual needs. So I'm hoping that this will become a reality across key disease areas in medicine. That's something that I and many others in the field are also trying to enable through the use of machine learning models and large data and learning over large data sets.
Thank you. Professor Bratko, do you maybe have a comment on the personalized medicine or?
Okay, actually, application of AI in medicine has been our field for quite a long time. Maybe at this point I can actually say that the first application of machine learning on real medical data was done in Ljubljana, in my laboratory, and in cooperation with the University Medical Center in Ljubljana. And those applications were cited very widely. And I think we were the first to notice that machine learning, after learning, can perform actually better in terms of diagnostic accuracy, better than the best medical experts. Then, we were very excited about this discovery at that time. But then later, we found a few years later that almost all laboratories who also tried to do that, they discovered the same thing, that the machine, strictly speaking, in terms of numerical accuracy, outperforms medical experts. But then let me say, just maybe add a few comments on what Marinka was discussing about personalized medicine. Recently, we were working with a neurologist on diagnosing Parkinson's disease, and it turned out that the main problem was not how to diagnose it, but the problem was the everyday management of and monitoring of a patient, and deciding about the dosage of the drug to be administered every day, from day-to-day basis, because the condition of the patient changes from day to day. Ideally, a medical doctor should be monitoring the patient, and they take into account the current situation, but that is in practice not possible because of lack of medical doctors. So the reality is that the patient can see the doctor more or less once a year only. And in the meantime, now it would be really very useful if an AI consultant could be used to take over this day-to-day management, monitoring of the patient, and recommending the dosage, the daily dosage of the drug. That would be very important, but that is not a reality yet, at least as far as I can say.
And you were both mentioning that for accurate treatment of people, we of course need a lot of data, personal data, and I think that can raise some privacy issues. In your opinion, how can countries guarantee high level of privacy surrounding the medical data or data in general? taken from individuals. And like, for example, countries like China are consistently collecting data from their citizens, which could be seen as invasion of privacy. What do you believe the balance should be between respecting citizens' privacy and developing artificial intelligence?
So I think this trade-off or balance between privacy and the use of data for training ML models is a very challenging one, and it's very challenging in medical settings, but in other areas as well. In particular, because what often happens is that now that we have these very high-performant models, it turned out that it's possible to get cues about the healthcare status of a person by not looking at healthcare data. Right, looking at data about the social profile of individual on social networks and their interactions with friends actually can provide important cues, and it's possible to extract important cues about healthcare status of that individuals, as well as a variety of other views that individual can have. For example, there is a very prominent study showing how it's possible to simply look at a handful of your closest friends in a social network and use that information to identify and predict with high accuracy political orientation in terms of what kind of party the individual is likely to vote, as well as what kind of views they have about the world. So that is particularly challenging because now it means that some of the laws that were accepted and regulation is not sufficient anymore, because we can get these cues about healthcare, for example, medical status from data that are not traditionally considered to be healthcare data sets.
Regarding the privacy issue with respect to medical data, is actually a very hot topic in the discussions on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And Europeans are, in fact, quite nervous about this, because the right to privacy is considered to be one of the rather fundamental human rights in Europe. So this kind of Chinese approach seems to be completely unacceptable. But for the reasons that Marinka already explained earlier, it seems that making sure that data privacy is respected will be quite a difficult technical problem, and many things will have to be done, including legislation, and probably other measures in order to do that to be really guaranteed.
Yeah, if I can just add to that a bit, for in terms of mentioning a few experiences that I had in a recent research project that I worked on, is it's quite challenging even within the US to share data across institutions, across even different departments, right? And so we started this podcast with this notion of all the promises of AI and potential opportunities, given that these large data sets are available. Yes, they are, but they exist in various silos, right? So one healthcare system or one hospital, for example, has their own data, and they cannot share that data and data about patients they have with another hospital, right? So that becomes very challenging then, because in principle, if one would want to train and develop important predictors for diagnosing or treatment recommendation, you would want to really get a large data set of patients that is very diverse in their representation. And that would mean getting data from multiple hospitals across different demographic regions, across different geographic regions as well, right? And so there are lots of from technical perspective, techniques such as federated learning are employed, or techniques that in the genomic data they can preserve privacy of genomes by essentially assuming there is some centralized repository of genomic data, but then the parts that actually the ML models are trained on are not on the actual measurements of the patients, but on encoded or encrypted representation of patients. And so that really then the data either is encrypted to the algorithms and cannot be easily discerned, or the data is still kept at their original location, and then we use federated learning algorithms that can essentially bring the models to the data rather than the data to the algorithms and models themselves. So that are some opportunities that are being implemented. But at the same time as this technical progress is being made, there is this alternative route, right, or progress also being made on the adversarial side, where when a particular genomic privacy algorithm is developed and published in the paper, very soon, typically in the literature, a few months later, there is a follow-up showing that it's possible to de-identify and actually de-identify patients that are encoded by the algorithm that was proposed just a few months ago. So this field is making progress tremendously quickly, right? So so that means that it's challenging for now practitioners that are trying to implement the DEC techniques to be on top of the state-of-the-art models for preserving privacy, as well as guarding against possible adversarial attacks where somebody would try to intentionally perturb the patient data in order to maximize some unwanted effects, right? So that's very challenging, as well as for the legislation to keep pace with these fast technical developments. And the questions regarded to ethics, as well as Professor Bratko has mentioned.
And if we maybe now put Slovenia into the mix, do you think that Slovenia is in the inferior place compared to other bigger countries such as US in terms of how many data we can collect? Or do you think that should Slovenia and other European countries collaborate to compete against larger countries or economic blocs in terms of collecting data and advancing in this field?
So, very interesting question. I would say certainly the Slovenia is not inferior in that regard, and I will give answer in two parts. One is will be more focused on medical data. So in terms of medical data, Slovenia is in very good position, potentially even better than the US. Why? That is because Slovenia has a universal healthcare system, which means that there is a centralized repository where the data is being collected and processed. And so that means that typically it's possible for an individual to easily get their information or their medical history for many years in the past. That is not the case for the United States. So in the United States, the healthcare system is much more segregated and distributed. People use variety of different health insurance companies. On average, an individual changes their healthcare insurance every few years. And there is really no sharing of information between healthcare insurance companies and medical records. So that means that even though there is a population of 300 plus million people, it's actually incredibly challenging to get information about that many people and their medical history because there is no centralized system. That is not the case for Slovenia and much of European countries. So Denmark is, for example, a very prominent northern light in the modeling and managing of medical data in the form of that they have decided back in 60s to give a unique identifier to every individual, every citizen, and then use that identifier to connect a variety of medical data. So they have these really large longitudinal data sets available. And other countries with universal healthcare system and centralized systems have this kind of advantage of data being centralized and easy to bring together, which is much harder in the case of medical data in the US, for example. The second question is certainly that about the data in general. So perhaps I'll give the floor to Professor Bratko, and I'll see if I can comment then further.
Okay. When I heard your question, my reaction was that I would think that this possible lack of data potentially in Slovenia is very limiting. Now, part of the answer would be, okay, I was glad that Marinka already debated that in the same sense as my thought was going, but another possibility is that data, in the case of potential lack of data will also be useful if it is collected in some other countries. So that will require international collaboration, but that the science is moving in that direction. There's another aspect of this of your question, and that is somehow that it implies that machine learning really needs huge amounts of data for learning. We need big data, and most people believe that big data is needed, and that's it. But in some areas, we actually, no matter what we do, we cannot get really big data. We have to work with small data, so to speak, small data, small number of examples. For example, in medical fields, we can get only the amount of data that, so to speak, the nature produces. We cannot generate more patients of a certain rare disease than they appear by nature. So we have to handle such domains by algorithms that can learn from small data, small amounts of data, and actually that is possible, and people can do that. How do people do that? They can learn from a really very small number of examples. People can do that by using the general knowledge about the domain, and that compensates for the lack of data. In machine learning, we also have there exist algorithms or approaches which can use small number of data and as compensation for a small number of data, they can use this general background knowledge. But unfortunately, the currently most successful machine learning approaches based on neural networks, they do require a lot of data, and they have difficulties using background knowledge. So I would say that I would expect much more progress to be made in terms of machine learning approaches that can learn from small amounts of data and can make very good use of background knowledge, this knowledge which is known prior to learning.
What do you think? How can artificial intelligence help developing countries advance, and what could Slovenia's role be through it? How do you envision the role of Slovenia in the global artificial intelligence community? And Professor Bratko, you can start with answering this question.
I think that with respect to developing countries, AI has actually one advantage, and that is that AI technology is rather easy to access, also by countries that are not all that rich. So it is accessible AI implementations and tools, and there are many freely available implementations and tools that can be easily accessed by anybody. Not just by rich countries. So that I would say can be very helpful to developing countries or countries that even don't have that much computational power, because although computation power always helps, but it is not exactly completely necessary for successful AI applications. So I think in that respect, the prospects are very good, but that does require professional people in the field. So it will be more the question of educating AI experts in developing countries and other reasons for them to not be successful. So yes, I think that is quite good. Okay, maybe there was also a question of the role of Slovenia in AI. I think Slovenia has been playing a rather nice role, quite a visible role, contributing to techniques of artificial intelligence, and now also contributing to other aspects which have to do with the development of the ethical principles for artificial intelligence, and maybe helping the development of legislation. And recently, in fact, just today I heard about recent research that was done at OECD, in which, according to some statistical measures, Slovenia is coming out really nicely. So it is among in the group of the most successful countries with respect to AI in Europe, like Germany or France.
And Professor Žitnik, what is your perspective on this situation?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what Professor Bratko said, that there are many opportunities for AI and AI tools in the developing countries. I'm very happy to see a variety of initiatives, including summer schools, workshops that are being organized in developing countries that in terms of really teaching fundamental AI and machine learning principles to professionals and students there. That is crucially important, of course, to create and educate about these topics in developing countries, in addition to bringing in deploying tools that were developed elsewhere to the extent that they can help developing countries. For example, it is now quite easy to take large models that were pre-trained on some of the healthcare data and use them and kind of encapsulate them in apps, so that in countries where people might not have access to some of the best healthcare systems, they can actually use apps to not treat or diagnose a disease, but essentially take care of themselves and just see if there is potentially a situation that would require an attention from healthcare professionals. And so that, for example, has been done for diabetic retinopathy, where there are tools that are used in India and Africa, where people themselves can take actually with a phone app and phone camera, take an image, take a photo of their eye, and then use that as input to a tool that will make prediction about whether they should see a healthcare professional and a doctor that they should visit. And the doctor might be actually hundreds of miles away from where they live, if they live in rural areas. But if there is a high chance or risk that something is really the problem with their eye, they would take that journey, right? And so it turns out that in developing countries that the access to mobile phones is not such a problem, but there is some critical other infrastructure that is missing. And so we see quite a large number of tools and algorithms being packaged and as apps and then released and used by general population in those countries. So I think that there's still quite a lot of opportunities there, and we have seen some initial successes, but it's also crucially important to build the workforce and educate professionals in those countries to essentially develop these models themselves, as they best know the circumstances of their home countries. in terms of the role of Slovenia in AI, I think the role is actually quite prominent. There are a number of researchers, including Professor Bratko, who were like foundational researchers in AI, right? So it's in that sense, I think the role of Slovenia is quite prominent. I remember when I was still a PhD student and going to various conferences, it very often happened that other researchers that I interacted with actually connected some of the key milestones in AI with Slovenian researchers and scientists. And in that regard, I think that the role of Slovenia is quite prominent, especially also in light of recent centers for AI at Josef Stefan Institute that partners with UNESCO and other initiatives that are taking place. And I think here Slovenia has much to offer to shape the AI-related policies to the European level. And I hope this will happen.
Okay, thank you for this nice words. Let's we talked about privacy and a lot of other aspects of AI, but maybe now let's dive into a little bit of a different topic. So we see that creativity is regarded as unique to humans, but when a machine is able to observe and imitate, how can we continue to distinguish whether the reaction is just an output or an actual consciousness? What do you think would be the best way to test consciousness of the machines? We have this Turing test, but do you think that is sufficient, or in your opinion, we would have to change it and make it better? And what is your opinion on this topic?
Okay, so I believe that creativity is still unique to humans. Underlying these models that we have been mentioning today is just a bunch of linear algebra, and well, there is an argument to make whether that is what's going on in human brain, but that's an important question that's being studied heavily. But these models by themselves, they're not magic, as though some part of general population think that really that they perform in such a magical way. But underlying these models is really a lot of linear algebra, mathematical operations, matrix multiplications, if you remember those things from high school or undergraduate studies, that actually that manipulate the input data sets that are also some matrices in a way that that is optimized for a accurate prediction of a particular outcome or a label, right? So there is this process that is kind of mathematically represented, codified. So there is nothing magical going on here. On the other, and that's from the technical perspective. On the other hand, I've seen lots of research and interest in actually using, for example, adversarial models to generate art and generate images and imitate some of the famous scientists, which is possible now today with transfer of artistic style. It's possible to create an image that resembles the style of Rembrandt or Picasso or some other famous artist. And so then this creates these questions of like, what kind of utility then these models provide. I think it is. I think these are nice, interesting artistic outputs that AI can provide. I don't think we are or anywhere close, or we cannot talk about consciousness at all. Regarding the Turing test that has been mentioned, and I'm sure Professor Bratko will kind of speak more about it. It is a very important test that is often used recently in the context of GPT-4, which is considered to be the most powerful model for language that was developed a few months ago that has billions of parameters and that can answer questions and engage in conversations with humans, right? And as soon as that model was released to the public, many people have used it to try to check whether in engaging in conversation in terms of asking questions, getting response from that GPT-4 algorithm, seems like one would talk to a human, which would indicate that the algorithm would pass a Turing test. And while that was true for some carefully designed types of conversations we would have with humans, it's certainly not the case across the broad range of conversations that we have with humans that require more complex reasoning rather than just learning from the data points and connecting the dots together. So I think there's still much progress that need to be made in order for these tests to be successful in AI models and really tie up all the loose ends that need to be resolved.
Professor Bratko, and what is your perspective on this topic?
Okay, it is your question is so big that we would need a lot more time to discuss it, or maybe we would need a whole workshop. But let me make a comment on what Marinka said last. So let me start with that. She mentioned the system GPT-4. And that system more or less passed the Turing test successfully, but not always. I think actually I would like to know what Marinka actually thinks about systems like GPT-4. I was last year. I was reading a lot about GPT-3, so obviously an inferior system to GPT-4, but still GPT-3 last year was a big hype. Many people were excited about that, but the same question appeared. Now, and that was the basic truth, that system, just like GPT-3, and as Marinka already said, completely lacks capability of reasoning. So how can such a system pass a Turing test or even be competitive in terms of the question that you asked, like where is consciousness here, if this system does not know what it is talking about? I happened to ask this question in a conference. A person who is kind of most familiar with the technology producing these systems, that person is Professor Joshua Benjo. So I asked this question just for fun because I thought I knew what his answer was, but it was a big conference with many people, non-professional people there attending. So I asked what he thought about systems like GPT-3, and he immediately jumped. He was very keen to answer that system does not know what it is talking about. There was another professor, another chair of that session, who again was very keen to answer and say exactly the same thing. So it looks like that development is really lacking some fundamental properties of AI, also in terms of Turing test and all these questions about consciousness. So Marinka, can you confirm that I understand this correctly?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's a great point that you have made. And just to add to that, these GPT-3 and 4 models, so these are just different versions in different generations of powerful AI models for language. The way they were constructed or trained is by sweeping through tremendous amount of data on the web, and through amount of data that is and knowledge that is digitized in terms of digital books. And so that's the data the models were using to train these large models with that's the data that's been used to train these large models with billions of parameters. Now, the models tend to imitate humans very well if that entails conversations that are similar to what is the data that the model has seen during training. But as soon as you go out of that zone, out of the knowledge that the model has seen during the process of training, it can perform quite miserably and make some obvious mistakes. And so that is, of course, a problem. It certainly does not indicate that that is close to a level of human capacity. And I remember when GPT-4 was released, there was lots of enthusiasm now if, we can just that could be a great system for in medicine, where instead of have experts or medical books, one could just ask queries to impose questions to this system. And it turned out that the answers provided by the model were very silly. And actually, they have reinforced some of the stereotypes that humans have, or some of the biases that also exist on the web. And that has happened because the data from these sources was used to train the model. So there is, I think we need to kind of make tremendous progress in this space. I acknowledge that GPT-3 and 4 and all these generations are great technical advance. They demonstrate that we're able to train as a field these very large models that are useful for translating language and kind of in many kind of applications that are not of critical that are not critical applications, but there is much more that needs to be made in terms of really consciousness or I would not even go that far, but in terms of really think of that models being deployed for some of critical applications, like what we were mentioning before, healthcare, justice, and some of the other fields, more like autonomous driving or things like that.
But do you think that there could be in a distant future a technology that could be as self-aware as humans, or do you think that computers could ever be as complex as human brain or cognitive processes? Do you think that is tangible or not?
Actually, I think we don't know what will happen. Surely, the development is towards a possibility that could happen. So the computers are actually able to pass the Turing test in some narrow areas. As already Marinka said, that was true for GPT-4. But then there were clearly areas when GPT-4 also was performed very badly. So I think there will be an increasing area or number of capabilities in which computers will be outperforming humans. But the question is, will they be ever able to outperform humans in the complete sense of intelligence? And it at the moment it does not look so. So there will for at least for a very long time, there will be areas in which computers will be still inferior. To return to Joshua Benjo's comment, he actually said that the line of development in GPT-3 and now GPT-4, which is just relying on more and more, using more and more data for learning and using more and more powerful hardware, that line is approaching the stage of diminishing returns. You can increase the resources a lot, and in return you get you get very small benefits from that. Now I actually have another worry about that, and that is that GPT-3 and now GPT-4, they are so good at imitating human language or human text. They are most of the time the text produced automatically is not distinguishable from human written text. Now that may be considered to be a big achievement, but that also presents a big threat, because suppose that now a lot of text generated by these tools will be, I mean, we are in the danger, I mean, we as a humanity, we are in danger of being completely flooded by this information pollution, being bombarded by a lot of text which looks like superficially making sense. We will never be sure, but in fact, it will be a completely void of any meaningful content. So I think at this point, I think there is something which I would like to propose, and so actually some other people have proposed it. But the fact that we would like to have all the text that is ever shown to any human labeled by the authorship, and this label should say generated by human or generated by machine. Because otherwise, without such labels, we may get lost.
Yeah, so if I can just briefly add to that, I cannot agree more with what was just said, because it's some of these language models that we are mentioning now here on the call have been already used to automatically write news articles based on a small number of cues or keywords. And so that really then produces the text that is hard for an average person to distinguish from a text written by human, right? So that has fundamental a problem, can lead to really challenging issues, right? Because will an average reader of those news articles be able to see that something is really just a made-up story? And it's possible now to produce text that is made up in this way, as well as images. You might have heard of deep fakes in that regard. And so that becomes challenging to then all of a sudden distinguish between what is real and what's not real, given that for the last century or so, for example, the work that journalists do that go in the war zones and take pictures of what's happening there, and that has been used as kind of definitive proof of, in many cases, of what's really going on in those areas. That all of a sudden it's not kind of has lost some of the value, or like it's become very challenging to decide what's real and not real. So it is very important to think about these problems. And perhaps if I can just make one final comment, since Tanya, you mentioned that all these models are becoming increasingly more complex, and will they ever mimic or capture the complexity of human behaviors and so on? And I think it's not just about the complexity, right? So because of the recent advances in AI that were also fueled by advances in hardware, and particular the availability of GPU units, which are very powerful computational hardware units that we use to train these models that can perform these linear algebra operations very quickly. We are now in this area where everyone wants to build just larger and greater and more complex models. But it's not just about that. Ideally, what we would want is to infer some of the core fundamental principles and then use those principles and inject them into the models so that these models are more principled in their behavior. We know also that human brain is not just a kind of a mixture where everything is connected to everything else in a way, but there is some modular design, and there are modules that are specialized for certain functions, and sort of that then decreases the complexity of description in some way. And I think then we need to make progress towards, and the field is making progress towards that area, where is first, typically, when we don't know what to do, is like, let's just train these complex models that map inputs to outputs. In terms of just being function approximators. But when deeper concepts and knowledge is gained, we want to decrease complexity of that models to ultimately arrive at kind of more principled modular design that would hopefully could have fewer parameters and kind of be easy to understand. So there is this interesting interplay between complexity and the number of parameters and the size of these models versus other design characteristics one would have, like modularity, for example.
No, really a lot of interesting points have been made, which I feel like just opens a whole new door of questions. But since we are approaching the end of this episode, maybe you can touch on what are your hopes for AI, and maybe do you expect another winter or maybe more summers in artificial intelligence? And what are your predictions for next 10 to 20 years? And Professor Bratko, please start.
Okay, thank you for the question. It is very interesting, and now our recent discussion about GPT-4 actually makes me believe that if there is going to be another winter, which I don't think it is very likely, but maybe the GPT-4 is a kind of a possible road to a new winter because of this development of AI capabilities in wrong direction. There is you also indicated a question just a few minutes ago about the complexity of AI models and the complexity of the human brain. And in terms of maybe suppose if you just consider the size of memory, for a long time the human brain looked like impossible to attain by computers. But now these GPT models actually just simply in terms of memory units or parameters in the neural networks, they have actually surpassed the complexity of the human brain. That does not mean that these neural networks are now more capable than the human brain, but still there is one parameter in which it has gone really very, very far, but without actually achieving the functionality of the human brain. So there is some fundamental mechanisms of the human brain which are missing in the current technology, which I think also Marinka had in mind. But anyway, to answer your question simply about a new AI winter, I don't think it will happen because AI has created so much technology that is now being used in so many areas, in so many forms, that it will stay there. So no, I suppose no winter. Again, on the questions that you asked in your previous question, there was also this question about computer creativity, and I think that is very interesting, and I believe that we can see some really interesting signs of creativity by computers. And if I may just mention one example that maybe is not so generally known, but I can understand it really well because I also play chess, so I understand playing chess, the game of chess. In chess, computers, of course, have been superior to humans now for at least 20 years. But so far, computers were good because they were playing a kind of boring chess, not avoiding to make mistakes. But now the recent computer programs that can play chess, I have in mind the program called AlphaZero. That one now plays completely differently and plays extremely creative chess, something that, this is really an enormous change. And that program has admirers among professional chess players who just admire the games played by AlphaZero. So many things are happening. And as Marinka said, a replica of Rembrandt, neural network that can paint like Rembrandt, and the results of painting are indistinguishable from Rembrandt. That raises the question of who is the author now of these paintings. It would be reasonable to assume that the author is again Rembrandt, but there are now questions, legal questions about legislation, how that will be defined.
Professor Žitnik, do you maybe want to add something to this?
Yeah, so I hope that AI and applications of AI will continue to grow in the next decade or so. On one front, I think the tremendous technical progress has been made in terms of novel algorithms, efficient architectures, and then I hope we'll see more and more thoughtful applications of AI to important areas. I also I don't think that winters are particularly likely. Then that might be because there seems to be quite a number of researchers who are trying to really deeply, thoughtful, and carefully think about responsible use of AI for different problems and what kind of inequities or disparities can be exacerbated by the use of AI models in certain areas, and how to mitigate those biases and unwanted effects. I hope that what will happen in the next decade or so, we will see these models being used more routinely in some aspects of our everyday life, that whether that means encountering with transportation, encountering with healthcare systems, and kind of I hope that our everyday lives in cities or in countries will be easier because of that. What I think is also crucially important is that other disciplines that are traditionally not thought of as AI or computer science related disciplines that are either adjacent or that go to humanities need to get involved in order to study what the responsible and ethical use of these models is, and in order to think about appropriate regulation or legislation in order to make sure that really everyone can benefit from these models, not necessarily just a small number of individuals or a small number of companies. So I hope that will happen over the next decade and so. But overall, I'm optimistic that we'll see many more successful applications of AI across our everyday life, so that at every hour of the day will in a way benefit in some way from the use of AI and helping us live better.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for such a great conversation. And before closing off, maybe do you have any resources such as books, articles, or maybe even podcasts that you would recommend to our audience?
Well, I can actually make a recommendation. I thought, often I recommend the website of the Future of Life Institute. They actually put a lot of research, or they have organized events which are related to the questions that we were talking about today, including the ethics of AI, including the use of artificial intelligence in autonomous weapons, and many others. And that web page I really like, and I often go there to when I need to participate in a discussion or in a committee on these topics. I go there and also to see all these open letters written by AI scientists on these topics. You also asked about books. I can repeat what I recommend about professional books to my students. So I usually recommend the book by Russell and Norvig, called Artificial Intelligence and Modern Approach, because quite uniquely that book has been a leading textbook for artificial intelligence for over 20 years. Of course, they had to make several new editions, so they got to edition 4 recently of that book. But I think that that book stands out among AI books so clearly that I clearly would like to recommend it.
Yeah, so if I can make a few recommendations to students who are listening here, I would highly recommend a podcast called Talking Machines. It's a podcast that was that's hosted by Ryan Adams, professor at Princeton Computer Science, and it was also hosted by Neil Lawrence from Cambridge CS. And it's a podcast that discusses every week some of the latest advancements of AI and kind of presents that in a way that's accessible to non-experts as well as discusses possible implications. So I highly recommend that one. Talking Machine is the name of that podcast. In terms of books, beyond what Professor Bratko mentioned, which I can make 2 recommendations. So that are more kind of general in AI space. And the one focused on healthcare is by Eric Topol. It says the title is Deep Medicine: How AI Can Make Healthcare Human Again. That's a very good one. And we touched some of the topics, and there were a few questions related to US versus China and superpowers of AI. And that is also discussed in a very interesting way in a book called AI Superpowers by Kei-Fu Lee, which is also a book that I recommend to everyone. Those are experts or just would like to learn more about societal and broader impacts that this technology can have.
Thank you all for joining us in this podcast. To our audience, we hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. We will be glad to hear your feedback. You can send us an email to podcast@asef.net. Please follow ASEF on social media to learn more about our professors, fellows, and the many activities hosted by ASEF. We hope to see you for our next episode, where we will be further discussing the field of medicine.